to what's going on in COVID as well. This is the burning platform to end all burning platforms.
Yes.
Now, who knows what's going to happen next? But this is the burning platform that everybody, at least anybody who's in a decision-making capacity, which also includes everybody because you make decisions about your life every day, are forced to think about change. And in many cases are forced to act in a change transformational capacity. Everybody, I don't know how many people, 7, 8 billion people, there's probably only a fraction that is sitting at home going, oh, aren't somehow affected or don't feel they need to change anything. Actually, it's by a large part. But the leaders all are thinking now something's got to change. If they don't, they're going to have what we're having in the United States, which is these incredible amount of protests, which doesn't make any regime look particularly good.
No, but I was thinking myself, like, when this all started, and like you said, what have you done with your last 3 months? What has everybody been doing? And the ones who really have maybe a foot in the future of being a disruptor, we're already starting to kind of figure out how to reinvent themselves or how to do something. And I definitely threw myself into that, but I can't help but feel it's the one person that always is now going to get overshadowed by even bigger government. You talked about the hamburger, McDonald's taking over and the little hamburger shops closing. Even in your book, you were talking about healthcare and how the doctors kind of didn't get to be the in-between anymore when big pharmacy took over. Like, I just can't help but feel like it's going to just get more and more like that because small business owners were the ones that were most hurt by COVID. I mean, everything had to shut down. How does the little guy survive?
Well, I just did discover something. I live in Brooklyn, which is a very diverse population ethnically, also income-wise. Brooklyn has this strange thing where you can see people walking on the street and everybody looks alike, but I guarantee in a group of, say, 1,000 people in a park, at least 3 or 4 of them will be multimillionaires, and they'll look just like the people who don't have a job.
Right.
We're kind of utopian that way. I have several friends who are in financial trouble. Have one friend in particular hasn't really worked in about 3 years. He got into a partnership, an investing partnership, that went south. Last time we talked about it, sounded like he had a lawsuit going on, but he needs some money. He was blissfully unaware of the fact that, at least in New York, anybody is eligible for unemployment insurance for 39 weeks, plus the extra $600 a week for 20 weeks. Knew nothing about it. Just, because you hear unemployment insurance, well, he's been unemployed for 3 years, so he already went through the system, but he didn't realize that he's considered self-employed, or simply said he has no source of income right now. That makes him eligible, and he needed the money. So part of it is you have a choice. You can either play the game and inform yourself, and as I said to a guy last night when I was walking my dog, I said, people like me, I'm not wealthy and I'm okay financially and good, but I'm not super wealthy. But I do keep my ears and eyes open for opportunities to make money. And that was one where, me and my Vistage group spent a lot of time talking about the PPP program, unemployment, to determine how really to get the most money to survive whatever was going to come. And so a lot of the people who are suffering don't seem to be informed. I'm not really sure why.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're lazy, if it's too technical for them, but there are leaders in these communities who should have been talking about this. So, one thing is you do have to disrupt yourself. After all, the buck ends with you as a human being of how you lead your life. And obviously there's some people who are disabled enough that it is tough for them to do that, but they have organizations to help them. In terms of the big trouncing the small, all I can say is Amazon, Facebook, all these companies that are gargantuan now, huge brands, started out small.
Sure.
And they had the ambition and the intelligence. Not every small business wants to get big. In fact, a lot of small businesses can make, small business owners can make a lot of money, especially in the professional services area if they're hardworking and smart. And I've had several clients who don't necessarily want to grow, they just want to optimize what they have. But yeah, as a rule of thumb, the bigger you are, the more power you have, and therefore you can make change to an industry to I mean, you can just make more things happen. And it's a source of disappointment for a lot of small business owners that somehow the SBA or whoever isn't fixing it. But let's remember, a lot of the money is coming through the SBA to small, medium-sized businesses if they take the time to figure out how to get it.
Right.
Yeah, so that's sort of a little thumbnail sketch of my view of it.
Right. But I look at it even like to the fitness business. I've been in fitness since I was 18 years old. So way back in, gosh, I even hate to say the year, but it was like back in the 80s. I started in fitness, and then it was the gyms.
Well, it shows that you're in fitness. So
Thank you. That at least I might be old, but at least I have some muscle, I guess. I don't know. But back then it was to work for the big companies. From Equinox wasn't even there yet. But Jack LaLanne, I believe, was one, and Woman's World, and Lucille Roberts. I mean, these are like New York chains because I grew up in New York. But then in the last couple of years, we started seeing these boutique fitness places opening up, where that used to kind of just be like a yoga thing. Like the yoga studios would have their own thing because it's noisy in a gym, and that's not a really great environment for yoga. But I think when CrossFit came in, CrossFit didn't want to put themselves in the middle of any other gym, so they made their own little lockers, and then that kind of opened up this whole boutique fitness. And I had so many friends of mine who opened up these little, whether it was a hit gym or whether it was a CrossFit or Pilates and yoga and this and that, they couldn't make it. I mean, a lot of them had to shut their doors during this time, and now we're going to go back to the big companies absorbing their customers.
Well, let's remember a lot of the big companies that are dependent on physical space are suffering. I mean, I think Nordstrom's is shuttering 300 stores.
Right.
Macy's is probably shuttering even more. And those are retailers. And restaurant chains. Well, okay, so here's my assessment of the restaurant business. Takeout, of course, has been something of a godsend to the restaurants that are able to do that or are willing to take the plunge and do that as opposed to serving people in their restaurant. And I'm trying to think of any of the restaurant chains, the big ones we think of, McDonald's or Burger King and all those.
Well, they already had drive-throughs, so in a way they were kind of already set up for it.
Exactly. So that is probably a case where the big ones had an advantage because they were already set up to do that. Now, restaurants are going to have a problem. Yeah. By the way, another industry where the big ones are suffering huge, although there are not a lot of small players per se, is airlines.
Yes.
But it also applies, well, hotels maybe less so, but airlines also, big ones are suffering big time. I mean, hugely. But in terms of restaurants, yeah, I know in New York at least, which is a big takeout city for a lot of obvious reasons, a lot of the small ones are trying to do takeout. They also are getting money from the government. And it is the small family neighborhood restaurants that will, in theory should thrive. It's a very bifurcated market. On one hand, you have the low end family style, McDonald's and so forth, and they do very well because it's about volume, low cost, attracts a lot of customers, and so forth. And then there's the high-end luxury segment. And in between, it's been very difficult for I know a number of restaurateurs that have suffered because they're sort of in the middle. They're not really family style. They're a little pricier than that, but they're not seen as a luxury, as a way of celebrating important events or as a status symbol. And I think, again, that's a trend that is just getting reinforced by what happened. The family restaurants, the low end are for the most part doing all right or surviving. And I mean, really the chains. The luxury guys are probably actually suffering more, but they've also gotten some money. They've also been able to restructure their staff. And it's hard if you like the food of a high-end restaurant like Masa, Benedet's closed, but it's hard to see that being served as a takeout and being worth they asked for it. It just.
But you figure they still got to turn on their lights. They still have their overhead, and now they have a limited capacity of how many people they could bring in. I mean, a lot of them, again, even if they're surviving now, how long can they keep that going if this goes past even, everybody's saying when the vaccine comes, but yikes, who knows when that really is going to be a viable, like, okay, we have a date and we know.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, tomorrow, in theory, I think a lot of businesses are able to open their doors again physically, probably with masks. And as of last week, at least in New York City, you can meet 10 or less people can congregate for a meeting or an event, uh,
Right.
and that's now legal. But that's, what we're talking again is a major shift in real estate. If lots of restaurants are going to go out of business, several things can happen. One is I actually know a fairly well-known restaurateur, more on the family, small, the lower end, although those are pretty high-end concepts conceptually, but they're still low-end price-wise. He wants to open a new concept, and in some ways, this is an ideal time to do it because you're rushing in
Yeah.
where everything's been kind of destroyed. You can start with a fresh field, basically occupying space in both the literal and the figurative term that is no longer occupied. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be very interesting. And then, of course, on the commercial side, landlords, one reason why some of these people can survive is they're not paying the rent.
Yeah.
And there's been a suspension of eviction. You can't evict a
Right.
tenant who's not paying. And so I'm talking specifically in New York City, obviously. So they've been protected, but that's going to go away. So, the landlords are suffering, the restaurants are suffering. And that's an area where you can only hypothesize what's going to happen next. I mean, what do you do with all those storefronts if restaurants go away, if restaurants go online, you know?
Yeah. So here's what I said to my sons, because we have this sushi restaurant that we all love, and we haven't been able to go, even though they have been doing takeout. We've just been like, oh no, let's just wait this out and we'll make
Mhm.
sushi at home, which I give it to them. It is not as easy as they make it
Oh,
look. Oh my goodness.
all right.
All right, we got something that resembled something, but it definitely wasn't like a good sushi restaurant. And the
Uh,
kids are like, well, what's going to happen to places like that? And I said, I picture take a restaurant storefront, have it cut in half, and on the back end of it, another restaurant opens, and it's pretty much just a carry-out window where people walk up and they get it like that. Especially in like a New York City area. I worked at when I was a kid, I worked at Roosevelt Field Mall. And
mhm,
in a way, they kind of had it like that. In the food court, you would go downstairs to get rid of all your
mhm,
garbage. There was a whole underground basement section, and you would
uh-huh,
literally back to back with another business. And
mhm,
that's how you sold whatever you were selling at your particular place. And
mhm. All right.
I don't know, I could see that being a future model.
Yeah, well, I think, one of the trends, obviously, takeout is not a recent phenomenon, but certainly hasn't really taken off. It really sort of started in the 60s and 70s. Takeout now is the only way to survive. I mean, the only business now that restaurants have. So that's bound to continue. And with the home becoming more of a place of everything going on, sure, not everybody wants to cook, so they're going to take out more and more, and it's very convenient. I think something like that for the lower end is probably I mean, it sort of exists in some ways. It's the high-end restaurants that I wonder how the hell are they going to survive in the takeout world. And I actually came up with an idea. I have an events staffing, a CEO of an event staffing company, a nationwide one, and he's kind of excited because now the world's his oyster and he's starting all sorts of new initiatives. And one of the ones we talked about was maybe takeout restaurants need to recreate the experience of being at that restaurant in your home.
Yeah.
And what he has is a whole bunch of waiters who do high-end parties. I mean, these are big, big parties, some very famous names. They know how to recreate or create an experience that's very high-end. And with a little training, if they're seconded to a restaurant, they could create that restaurant's experience. Now, what I don't know is if whether the wealthy people of the world are that comfortable having somebody in to recreate the experience, whatever that might mean. But I said, look, if they're going to have to do takeout, they got to figure out how to make it high end. And your waiters are trained to work in high end, stressful situations. You might want to think about a business around that.
Right. And I find the irony is that, again, we talk about patterns. The first takeout was really the food trucks that showed up during the Industrial Revolution outside the factories. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah.
And I'm like, and now
Yes,
here
no,
we're
it's
going
over.
kind of right back
Yeah,
full circle, and gone is the power lunch now, though. You know how many
yeah,
people do deals? Like I have friends out in the Hamptons who all, if they're trying to get a deal going between the bank or this or that, they take them to lunch.
right,
There's a lot of power deals that go on.
right, right. Or golfing.
Yeah, or go, yeah, well, golfing is
Golfing's,
definitely the healthier one.
yeah. Yeah, but not everybody plays golf.
Yeah.
Everybody has to eat. Yeah, it's amazing the deals that are happening in all areas that have, not allowed, obviously, no face-to-face meetings. It's amazing the activity going on, and it's mostly the visionaries who are willing to take the risk and put money down, whether it is to rent a storefront for a retail or a boutique, whether it's to join my group. I'm actually doing quite well with recruitment to my group, um, because people are now saying, look, this is an opportunity. It may sound risky, but I understand the risk. I'm willing to spend money now. So you'd be surprised at the deals that are, and they're starting to snowball too.
So they come
So
to your group for coaching in that regard. Like they're like, okay, this is an opportunity, but I want to kind of do this with the best approach possible. They come to you, and that's something that you help them with.
yeah, and there's a cost associated with it, and so there was a moment where it was kind of crickets, mostly because people were dealing with non-strategic issues, if you want to call that, basically survival, and they just didn't have the mindset. They didn't have the peace of mind to consider this. Now that's changed for some obvious reasons, mostly because some of these guys say, look, I need now to work with other CEOs or business owners, because who knows what's going to happen next, and why not have a group who's combined coming up with ideas and at least more clarity about the future. But it was just an example of businesses that are, my business was totally face to face. I mean, I couldn't even imagine
Yeah.
doing anything with the CEO without being there front and center for, they feel like they're getting more out of it. They see the effort I put into it. Also, I can just read the situation better. And yet, this virtual thing has helped. And I'm going to start incorporating virtual events, whatever, into my practice because I think it's important. If you have to show up to a monthly meeting as part of a group, and you, for business reasons, are in Texas or something, you can
Right.
dial in.
Yeah.
And I've learned enough now about it to be able to make sure you're part of the meeting, you're incorporated into it. But it took some learning. I mean, it really did. I remember my first couple of virtual sessions, I don't think they went very well. And it was mostly because I couldn't read the body language. And then I would say things that were a little bit, you have to challenge your clients, but I would
Right.
not really, I would do it a little bit too brusque and abrupt for, I guess, how they usually experience me. And they didn't go that well. And I've since now learned how to do this. Again, this burning platform forced me to figure this out. And it'll be a huge boost because now I can really work with anybody anywhere in the world. It's just a slightly different business model.
Right. So again, so you got to learn how to change your approach and how you do. Because when you think about it, you're in a meeting, and yeah, sometimes things come across as brusque. Otherwise, the meeting just kind of is pointless and goes nowhere. So somebody
Mm-hmm.
always has to kind of say, well, this is what it is and where it's going. But then there's that water cooler talk afterward where you get to kind of tell a joke or kind of, show that, I'm not this brusque person. I'm just was making a point. And yeah,
Right.
again, that's something once we click end of meeting, you don't have that moment to they're left
Yeah,
with the impression that they're left with.
exactly. Or the lunch break or a bathroom break. You don't have that chance to go to the person and say, sorry, I came across maybe a little brusque.
Right.
Um, I mean, in theory you do, but it doesn't quite work that way virtually. No, what it was really, I think I wasn't reading the situation well, or I wasn't with that person so close that there's almost this energy, and you can often judge how challenging you can be, or what you can say based on what the energy is. You really, at least for me, for the first month or so, it was very hard to read the energy. Now I think I can do it, and it seems simple, but when you're in the middle of a coaching session, an expensive one, and you're not reading somebody's body language or the energy, yeah, it's, first of all, you could have an accident, and second of all, they don't feel necessarily that they're getting the value that they think they should be.
Right. And I can totally see it like from the fitness side when I do the first assessment with somebody. I don't even ask them many questions. pretty much watch how they're standing. I could tell. Do they shift
Yeah,
their weight to one foot or the other? Are they hunched? Are their arms like this? Do they seem
right,
self-conscious? Like the nonverbal cues when it comes to a fitness assessment is so much more important than me saying, "Tell me what's going on with you."
right, exactly. And it's interesting you said that. For a long time, I would go into a session thinking, oh God, so I haven't worked out for a day or so. The gut's coming back, blah, blah. And the trainer immediately would start focusing on that part of my body without me saying anything. And I just assumed
You
it
have a
was supposed to
tell.
make
You have
my
a
look
tell or something like that. Everybody has a tell. Yeah.
right. And one of the kind of freaky moments of my life is I've been with my doctor for 15, 20 years. And very early on, he said, when you walk in the door, I can tell whether or not there's a problem. And in fact, I could probably even tell you what the problem is. And I think, yeah, I mean, he's not really a braggart anyhow, but that was interesting. And I began, looking at myself and saying, yeah, if I were really, it's like when I walk into a client situation, I always want to meet them in the office because immediately I can tell what's going on by the employees, the energy, how the office is furnished, and so forth,
Right.
and then how they're holding themselves and how the conversation goes.
Because then you can
Me.
just see like it being chaos, right? Say you walk in and it's kind of chaotic and you see somebody
Mhm.
frustrated in the corner and this and that. And then all of a sudden it's time for the conference and you didn't have an
Correct.
opportunity to see all this before. They could be like, all right, everybody, shh. And now he's like,
Yeah, and some do. I mean, I think even now, some have told their group, just watch it when John shows up. But it's also the way they talk, how defensive they're being, um, whether or not they're constantly trying to make everything look really good. It doesn't mean that they're, the business is in trouble necessarily, but it also means that as a coach, they may not be an ideal client. But there are many things you can read right off the bat, and you're sort of trained to do that.
yeah. And I find that funny. That's a dynamic that I see as well. And I think that we both have that in
Mhm.
common in totally two different industries. But they hire me to come and help them because they are struggling with either fitness or
Mhm.
maybe it's a weight issue or a health issue or something
Mhm.
like that,
Right,
and I will watch them. I almost like to like see them before they see me so I can get
right.
them off guard and I kind of make
Mhm.
my mental notes. And then as
Yeah.
soon as I say to them, so tell me, do you have any pain in your right leg or left leg? And all of a sudden everything is fine. They stand up straighter, they change how they are, and everything is
Yeah,
good. And I'm like, well, why do we have to do this dance? You
yeah,
hired me to help.
yeah.
And I know it's hard to poke at the thing that is probably, it's sensitive. It's a very
Right.
sensitive issue, especially weight. I work in medical weight loss, and I understand how hard that is. That's a lifetime of, for most of them anyway. It's a
Yeah.
lifetime of a lot of mixed
Discipline.
emotions.
Yeah.
And then I got to come in and say, you know, how about this? How about that? It's hard.
Right.
It's hard to open yourself up like that. And I think
Oh
it's
yeah.
been harder when you don't get the sense of who the person is in person.
Yeah. I mean, just the energy, if nothing else, the energy. Yeah, it's just so there are a lot of businesses, again, the opportunity of COVID-19 in the last 3 months, 4 months, is that many of us have learned how to replace the face-to-face experience with a virtual experience. That's not to say that I can't wait. I mean, I can't wait till I can do everything in person. I've done a few things. I actually did a coaching session with masks in Central Park. Hit a young child, so we agreed masks were going to stay on. That was interesting too.
Because nobody can
Yeah,
understand what you're saying, right? They're like, I can't
yeah, no,
understand
you
what you're
can't.
saying.
You forget that when people are talking, the mouth, the way the mouth looks and reacts, tells you a lot.
Yeah.
And eyes, we always say you can see the soul through the eyes. Well, without the mask, and really this much, there's a lot you're missing, or you just wish that you could see that person's full face.
I know, but on that subject, I realize now that I'm lucky to have wrinkles because you can still tell when I'm smiling even when I'm wearing a mask. It's the
Yeah,
only good thing about wrinkles. The only good thing I'm going to say is that people
right.
look at me and they're like, she's smiling. I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, so you can't do what I do, which that's one reason why I have this goatee is it hides the wrinkles. But yeah, no, it's true. And I'm pretty open book, and sometimes you should be a little more poker faced. So sometimes I'll purse my lips. You can tell if I'm not happy with something. The mask hides that. So yeah,
Oh,
there
yeah,
are
that's
benefits to
true.
the mask.
That's very true. I didn't think of it like that. Huh.
Yeah, I don't like it if well, maybe it helps if somebody sees me pursing my lips, they can gird themselves for whatever is going to come. Usually, it's not pleasant. So, but
Yeah. But I have watched like a lot of like miscommunication go on. I was going for a run and I didn't have a mask on because
mhm,
I was out running and they had just started up the farmers market in a empty parking lot that I had been running through, or it had been empty. But they
right.
started the farmers market again. And when I got there, the guard was checking every car to make sure everybody had their masks on. And he looked at me and went, and I was like, oh no, like immediately I was like, I'm in trouble. But I was running and I was running through and I can go back the other way. And he's like, oh no, you're fine. But again, I couldn't see his face. I wasn't sure if I was in trouble or I wasn't. I mean,
Yeah,
I went
right.
back to like Catholic schoolgirl Lynn. I was like, I don't even know what to do.
Yeah. Well, I actually was allowed into a pharmacy without a mask. He didn't know. I mean, I told him I forgot it, but he, I think, thought I forgot it at home. I happened to have my car there, and I was all set to go back to the car. I said, no, no, it's all right. Just a warning, don't do it again. So I was actually a little surprised that I could go into a pharmacy of all places without my mask. But that's also typical Brooklyn. We tend to, again, not break, but tend to bend rules and so forth to
Yeah, if that's the
surround.
pharmacist in Brooklyn, I guarantee the lady online in Brooklyn isn't going to be as happy, right? I've
Yeah.
watched people
Well,
online.
fortunately, yeah. Fortunately, of course, they only allow like 10 people at any time,
Right.
and the pharmacist had, of course, the plastic shield in front of her. Um,